Kagurabachi Chapter 105 is here, and it truly feels like the climax of this Kamunabi invasion arc is finally here. Uh, we have some very, very intense moments this chapter, and honestly, a phenomenal entrance for the seeming final villain of Kagurabachi. So, without further ado, I'm just going to jump right into the deep dive. This is, again, chapter 105, and the chapter opens up with that same panel of Yura that we left off last chapter, of him levitating above the ground, the flowers blooming off of his body, and the swordmaster being prepared to take over Yura's body through the influence of the Magatsumi. But where this chapter picks up, we actually see Samura coming in, jumping in on top of Yura to seemingly try to finish him off because they felt a surge of the Magatsumi's power last chapter when the blade actually began to come out of its sheath, which we know no one besides the actual wielder of the Magatsumi can actually unsheath it. And we even see them think to themselves, Samura internally says he never drew it. Of course, only the swordmaster himself can draw it. And he says, yet all my senses are warning me. And he goes in to burn Yura even further with the power of the Flames of Mercy through Suzaku. And he thinks to himself that even at this level of firepower, it's not enough to completely burn off the influence of the Magatsumi, because you can still see the black in Yura's pupils as he's burning. But then we see both Samura and Yura teleport up into the sky, seemingly to get Yura's body a further amount of distance away from the Magatsumi, because obviously he doesn't want him to be able to pick it back up to essentially restart the battle. So he teleports him up into the air, but then this is where we get a quick little snapshot of the Swordmaster's eyes, and then we see a kind of a shocked, surprised face on Samura, and then both of them kind of go flying in opposite directions into two different buildings. And this is where we see Samura kind of land, compose himself, but then we actually see Yura's body go tumbling, crashing through the skyscraper across the street. And it's very interesting here because we see Yura's face is just shaded black, all scratchy, and you can't actually see any defining features on his face as he's just ragdolling through the different levels of this building. It's a very unnerving panel, clearly indicative of what is occurring with his body right now, not actually having any form yet, because he is in the middle of the transformation from Yura to Akimura. And this is where Samura even says that the feeling of his flames healing the Shinichi's encroachment on his body is gone at this point. And then even though his body, Yura's body, is clearly connected to the Shinichi, that means, in other words, his connection to the Shinichi is no longer an abnormality. Remember, that's what Suzaku was targeting, was the fact that since Yura was not the contracted sword bearer of the Magatsumi, the encroachment that allowed him to utilize the powers of the blade was an abnormality that was occurring in his body, and that's what Suzaku was basically purifying. It was healing that abnormality, and it was breaking the connection between the two. But now he's saying that that feeling of the flames that were healing the encroachment, it's gone. Meaning that there is no longer an abnormality in the body. And obviously that is a very bad sign. That means for all intents and purposes, that now Yura's body is the sword master's body. It is recognized, one and the same. And this is where we get to see a panel of Yura just floating in darkness and just laying on the floor. And we actually get to cut to see the swordmaster's body back in his cell at the Kaminabi headquarters. And it's the same thing where his face, he's just laying on the ground, but his face is completely like shaded black. So you can't see any of his features. And we cut back to Yura in the building, and he goes from laying on the ground to just standing straight up. And this is where he looks down and kind of like grabs his tie, and he says, "A suit." And he says, "Wielding the Shinichi enchanted blade in a suit? That's just wrong." So this is Akimura here, the swordmaster. He is now fully in control, seemingly fully transformed into his self. And the first thing he cares about, it happens to be the wardrobe that he's wearing when wielding the Shinichi. And it's just very interesting because clearly he has a deep connection with the blade, and he sees the enchanted blades as something sacred, and it's deserving of a certain level of almost decorum. And that's where we conveniently see he is in front of what seems to be a shop for sword masters and sorcerers. So if you look inside the building, it's just like all these cool robes and old like traditional garb. And then of course there is a seemingly perfect outfit right in the window opening, the main window of the store. And Akimura sees it. And this is where Samura says that it's unmistakable. His voice, his smell, everything. There's no doubt in his mind. It is him. And then this is where we see that the glass was shattered around the mannequin that had that wardrobe on. The wardrobe's gone. And we see the Yura's suit and shoes all nicely folded up and put on the ground. And this is where Akimura is walking towards the glass on the outside of the building. And he just simply reaches his hand out and shatters the glass. And this is where we get narration saying that the man Kunishigi Rokuhira trusted above all others and entrusted with his greatest masterpiece. Because remember, that's what Shinichi is. Shinichi is just the term for masterpiece. And it being the greatest enchanted blade just means that this is his magnum opus, and he entrusted that to the sword master. And this is where we get an awesome panel of the sword master coming out of the broken glass of the building, just floating in midair with the Magatsumi floating right in front of him. Don't know how exactly he is just legitimately levitating. Not sure what that has to do with vitality. I don't know if it is just the sheer amount of spirit energy he has allows him to just levitate. Not sure. I think obviously this guy specifically is capable of a whole other stratosphere of power that we may have not even seen. Well, we definitely haven't seen, but I think he's going to be the one to introduce us to that pinnacle of sorcery and sword mastery that we haven't seen yet in the series. And this is actually where we see him come not face to face, but having a conversation with Samura, because he says, "Long time no see, Samura." And Samura's just like, "Akimura, he's sweating bullets here." Rightfully so. The last time he saw him was when he fought with all the other enchanted blade users to stop him. So this is the last time was 18 years ago, and it was not friendly. And right here, Akimura says that your eyes like, your eyes, you healed them. And he even says, you look cool. And we kind of get to run through where Yura was talking about the fact that the Swordmaster was in his right mind. But this is where Samura is, his internal monologue is going, saying that they already knew he had not lost his mind. All the sword bearers confronted him. He was in full possession of his senses. The war had simply changed his beliefs. And, nonetheless, the scholars deemed him insane because there was no other way to explain the inordinate scale and force of the malediction. It was just too incomprehensible to attest it to a sane person, basically. It was so crazy, such a astronomical feat that they assumed he had just had a psychotic break, and it basically synergized with the power of the Magatsumi to produce the malediction in this huge scale. But it's not true, because only they knew too well why he had been chosen to wield the Shinichi. The mental fortitude derived from his innate gifts and his ironclad beliefs. The monumental power of the malediction, the fact that he survived 18 years in a cell where he had absolutely no contact with anybody, anything, and he remained perfectly lucid during that whole experience. Just the mental strength that would require is absolutely insane to me. And Samura says that all of these things, so like the monumental power of the malediction, the, surviving 18 years in that stasis, and the way that he was able to hijack Yura's body remotely, all of those things are surprising, but also all reconcilable given the fact that they know who Akimura Soga is. And he says, it's basically you can reconcile all of those things purely because Akimura Soga was peerless. Which this is coming from Samura. Samura, who is a master of the EI White purity style and one of the strongest enchanted blade users. And he is saying that in terms of power, mental fortitude, and skills, Akimura Soga, the Swordmaster, is peerless. And I mean, everything that we've heard and seen up until this point pointed like in that direction, of course, but just to have Samura actually say that, it really puts into perspective just how powerful this person is. And honestly, it's just such a monumental task now that he is free. Like the good guys are in a huge bind. This is where, like I said in the beginning of this video, it feels like the conclusion of this arc is coming very soon. And not exactly sure how that's going to look, because Akimura did say to Yura that he was going to give his body back. Now, he did not give like a time limit on when he's going to do that, but for some reason I get the feeling that he can't fully take over Yura's body for extended periods of time. Could totally be wrong on that. This is just a general feeling. My thought is he's going to maybe use this opportunity to break his actual body out of the Kamunabi headquarters while he's able to wield the power of the Magatsumi, because no one can basically stand in his way at this point, and then basically give Yura back his body after that. But obviously things could be much different. Not sure. That's just kind of how I see it going. And so this is where we then cut to Samura thinking to himself that they're close to where they started their battle. It was already mostly cleared out, and then Shiba was able to clear out, the stragglers, whoever was left. And then we get Akimura kind of giving us some dialogue saying that he was resigned to die down in his cell. He had thought, when they imprisoned him after the malediction, he understood. He understood why it happened. He says that it's unfortunate, but he's saying it's unfortunate because he believes that his existence and society's mainstream ethics are just too incompatible. So as long as he was operating, he would always be at odds with the mainstream ethics of society, so it would always cause an issue. And it's coming down to a matter of beliefs and principles. And he's saying he understands, again, which is very interesting for his character, because again, it's like he's operating not based off of malice. He's operating based off of his stalwart, ironclad beliefs. And he knows that they don't match up with what most people would think is right, but that still doesn't deter him from what he thinks is right and what he's willing to do to attain those goals. So he continues on saying that, someone like, even though he's incompatible with the mainstream ethics of society, he says that somebody had to venture where no one else dared. And the day that he eradicated the enemy, he fulfilled his role. So wiping out any potential future threat from Shikoku seemed to be what his goal was. So, even though it was a sacrifice, he viewed it as a necessary sacrifice, a means to an end. Those 200,000 civilians were a means to basically eradicate the potential of a threat on the level of the Seitei War from ever happening again. And he thought after that his role was complete, and that was enough. And he says, or so I thought. And then this is where we get a flash to Yura laying on the ground from his battle saying, we needed a hero. And as we know from Yura's backstory, the tragedy that happened with him and his wife happened after the war. So after Akimura believed that his role was complete, and now he is seeing that there is still chaos and evil and an enemy to apply his principles against, to, seemingly fulfill his role again as a hero. Now, what does that look like? I have absolutely no clue, because clearly this man is capable of incredible feats, but that could also be incredible catastrophes. And we know he is willing, as long as he can justify his actions with a belief behind them that he believes to be, high enough, important enough, then he is capable of horrendous acts of violence. But that's enough, I just think his character, it's already starting to kind of build on itself, and it just has so many possibilities for the future. But this is actually where we see him reach out and grab the hilt, the handle of the Magatsumi, and it just says Magatsumi. And we get an awesome panel looking over the skyline of the city as he draws the blade out, and we have just like this pure black liquid spirit energy start to pour out of the entire skyscraper behind him. Like, it's coming out of the floors, but then it comes from the ceiling too, and it's covering the entire building at the same time as he pulls the blade from its sheath, and it finally comes all the way out. So now we have finally seen the Magatsumi be drawn completely for the first time in the series. And he says to Samura that he has one question that he's struggling to understand. He says, "Why did my brother, Rokuhira, seal away the enchanted blades?" And this is where we then see Chihiro down on the ground with the N10, and he is totally sweating. Again, anybody should be that's in the vicinity. And Akimura sees him, and he says, "So that's the answer." Obviously referring to Chihiro, because Samura's like, "Chihiro." But this is where we get this incredible panel of Akimura swinging the blade, swinging the Magatsumi, and he says, "Butterfly." And we see a panel of Samura inside the building, and it's just clean sliced and then shifted slightly. So it's a very cool dynamic visual for the panel actually splitting. And in the next page, in double page spread, we see the entire building and buildings behind it just eviscerated in a giant slash and blast. So I have no idea what Butterfly does besides it's just a massive attack. I don't know what this has to do with vitality, because that is what the Magatsumi's powers are centralized around. And we know like what Centipede does, and we have some kind of thoughts on, you know, what Spider does. But I have no idea what Butterfly does. And this also raises a huge question too, because so far all we've seen for each enchanted blade, we've seen 3 main abilities that they are capable of. You know, N10, it's black, red, and Nishiki. Samura's owl, crow, Suzaku. You know, Cloud Gouger was Mei, Ko, and Yue for ice. So it's always been in 3s. Kumiyuri was play and banquet. We didn't get to see the third, but we know Hirohiko talked about using the third ability. But this seemingly would indicate that the Magatsumi actually has 4 abilities, because we've seen Centipede, we've seen Spider, and we've seen Dragonfly, but we've never seen Butterfly. So that would be 4 abilities, which, don't get me wrong, for the masterpiece of all enchanted blades, that would not surprise me too much. But it's just, this is just being drilled into us. This blade and Akimura himself are just completely exceptional. They are on a completely different level. And after this giant attack, we have Chihiro trying to call out for Samura, but Akimura is already right there, blade to Chihiro's throat, and he just says, "How you've grown, Chihiro." And that is where the chapter ends. Now, obviously, Akimura was extremely close with Kunishige. So it's like, you know, he says how he's grown, so he's obviously met Chihiro at some point, but at least as of so far in the series, Chihiro himself has not talked about Akimura at all. So we don't know what he knows about him and what exactly their relationship was. So I'm curious to see how this conversation goes, and considering that Akimura still views Kunishige as his brother, I don't think he would just outright kill Chihiro here. So I actually think he's kind of safe. But Samura, he would not just get off-screened like that. I know that for a fact. I'm assuming he used Crow to teleport out of the way. That's my hope, at least. But like I've been saying the last couple videos, I'm very, very scared for Samura. I have some serious death flags going on, and this chapter did not help ease any of those worries. But this is, this is where I'm going to end it. I'd love to hear what all of you guys thought about this chapter, what you think about Akimura, design-wise. What do you think is actually going to happen over the next couple chapters? How do you think that this invasion is going to end? Just your general thoughts, and and what you think of where Kagurabachi is right now. Because I am absolutely having a blast with this. I'm having a blast making these videos, and I'm hoping that you guys are enjoying the videos as well, and also obviously the manga. So I'm going to end it here. I thank you guys so much for tuning in and hopefully getting some value. So I will catch you guys in the next video, and I hope you have a great day or night wherever you're at. And yeah, that's it for me today. Peace.